welcome back to a new Girl Culture podcast. I am your host, Molly Wills Reed, and I am so excited to be joined by Victoria Sinis. She is joining us all the way from down under the lovely Australia, which is so exciting and good for her because it's super early there. Victoria, we're so happy to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm
Yeah,
really
I
excited.
we briefly connected before this, and I don't honestly remember how I came across you, but I just heard your story and immediately wanted to know more and share your story with our audience because obviously we are in the space of girlhood and leading into womanhood and um, redefining or reclaiming, I guess, girl culture based on God's principles and his heart for us as women. And just your story speaks so perfectly to that. So I'm so excited. But before we get in, I'm going to do a quick little intro for you, if that's okay. So
Yeah.
please meet Victoria Sinis. Victoria was a former OnlyFans recruiter who has since been radically saved by Jesus and now feels called to reveal the truth and dark side of this industry, wreaking havoc on girl culture. Victoria now visits girls' schools and institutions, sharing her story to empower young girls. Victoria is a real life role model saved by grace, using her broken past to restore hearts and minds of girls everywhere. Um, that's just scratching the surface. And I'm just really, like I said, excited to hear the full story. So let's start a little bit about get into a little bit about you. What was your girlhood like?
Oh, that's a great question. Like more, do you mean like teenage
So
years
I
or?
that's also a great question. I think girlhood starts like elementary, what you can remember, and then getting into like teen.
For me, in like elementary school, I was just a really quirky kid. I've always been like really creative. Like some of the things I loved doing when I was little was like scrapbooking, and my mum would buy me scrapbooks, and I would spend hours just like putting pictures in these and creating these, and I'd make them for my friends and stuff like that. And I loved baking. I've always loved to cook, but like baking was like my thing when I was little. And so just like my girlhood when I was like in elementary school was really sweet. You know, I was the youngest girl. Well, I'm the youngest on all sides of my family. So my mum is one of
Wow.
7, and I'm the youngest. Yeah. So I'm the baby on that side, and then my dad's one of 4, and so I'm the youngest on that side. And some of like my age gaps between my cousins are like
Okay.
20 years. Um, and my oldest brother is 9 years older than me. And then my middle brother is 3.5 years older than me. So I'm the baby
You're
like
the baby.
everywhere.
That's cool.
Yeah. So like it just meant that like I don't know, like I grew up like hanging out with my brothers heaps, hanging out with my cousins heaps, like all that type of stuff. So I had a really sweet, I guess, childhood from that perspective. And then coming into my teenage years, I honestly, the thing is, it's so interesting, like the duality of when I talk about this in a Christian perspective, people are like, whoa, you're wild. And then I'm like, that's just the world. Like I was a very
I
normal
was the
teenager
same.
girl,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, I've had some interesting things happen to me. Like, I was introduced to drugs at a very, very young
Okay.
age, which is not good. But, like, that's also just the Aussie culture. So, growing up, like, I loved high school. High school was like a social thing for me. So, I got to go there. Like, the first couple years were quite rough. Like, but then once that smoothed out, I had a great group of friends. I had friends in the way that it kind of works here. I'm not too sure if it's this way in the States, but um, it goes by like the different areas you live in, but also the different nationalities.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up in like, yeah, the East. So in the East, I had like the private school kids, then you had the public school kids, but then you'd go to the West, and then it'd be very different. But over in the West, you would hang out with all the Greeks. But then in the like, it's just like this
That's a
interesting.
little more specific. I feel like it's kind of general. Like there's like private school kids and then there's public school kids, there's city kids, and then that's a little more specific, but fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
what
in
city?
this one area, um, city
Or where were
like
you where were you living when you were in your teenage years?
yeah, I was more like a
Suburbs,
suburbs kid
okay.
growing
Of
up.
Melbourne?
So yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of Melbourne. Yeah, so I lived about, like, 25, 30 minutes from, like, the heart or maybe, like, 30 minutes from the CBD. So, yeah, for us growing up, it was more like the suburb
Yeah.
hangs than
Yeah,
anything
same.
else. So, yeah, that's yeah. So, honestly, like, just, like, to encapsulate, like, girlhood for me, it was just fun. Like I'm really blessed. It was so funny. I was having this conversation actually with a friend the other day. As wild as my youth was, I'm really blessed that I didn't see anything crazy. Like the parties we would go to, we would get kids like I'm talking big groups of specific type of people that would rock up looking to start fights.
Mm.
Like at the parties I went to, people had been, you know,
Oh my
stabbed,
gosh.
bashed, like all the but I never saw yeah, that's what I'm saying, like rough, like the area parties that you would have with some like there'd be hundreds of kids. So of course these things would happen. And different nationalities had like different like beef
Yeah.
with like, but like none of this is super deep. It's all superficial, like just teenage things. Um but I never saw anything like that. You know, I never saw any of the violence aspect and stuff. It was always like me and my friends would come, would probably get drunk and then like talk about it at school for
Yeah.
the next week. Like, so all of that to say, like, I would like to, whenever I reflect on my teenage years, as much as there obviously was ebbs and flows, I'm like, as a whole, I had a really beautiful like teenage experience for as
That's
worldly as it
amazing.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. I certainly was a rebellious, and I think we talked about this briefly in our conversation that
Yeah.
I think when you have that sort of leadership, um, you know, big dreamer kind of mindset, when you're a teenager, you don't exactly know how to channel that. Um, and so
Mm.
you do what you have in front of you. You pursue popularity, you pursue, going to parties and having lots of friends because that's what is familiar and that's what you do, right? And
Mm.
so I love hearing your perspective, and I by the grace of God did not see too much either. But
Mm.
certainly got close. So okay, so
Yeah.
girlhood, teenage years, was your family, did you guys have any faith in your family?
So growing up, I remembered going to church when I was like a little kid. And I think that the more I'm understanding about my parents' faith journey, the more I'm understanding is that they were involved in like church and stuff like that. But it honestly stopped, I think, when I was around 7 to
Okay.
10 years old. And unfortunately, there was nothing really in my family life that I would say reflected faith besides the fact that people knew that when you like, you can't swear in my
Mm,
house, and my parents didn't drink.
okay.
But that wasn't even like a faith thing, that was more just like a preference thing, I would say, the drinking. So yeah, which is really unfortunate, but yeah, definitely there wasn't too much else, that was really reflective of faith
Okay,
in my
so
home.
Victoria is a young adult, moving from girlhood into womanhood. Um, Obviously, the big question mark here that I want to unpack is the OnlyFans experience and then how that has impacted and influenced what you're doing now. Um, what was before OnlyFans, and then how did you get into that? So basically, who you're describing right now just doesn't connect with pursuing a career in OnlyFans.
Yeah, so it's, I guess, to talk about, like, the formative years and all those type of things, and, so when I guess it'll make more sense. So for me, my almost manifestation of how I thought I was going to make it in life and what I needed for validation wasn't through, sexualizing myself to the degree of like doing OnlyFans or that type of work. For me, it was always
Okay.
business. So for me, I always felt like the only way that I would ever make it in life, the only way that I would ever matter, the only way that I would be there was if I had a really, really successful business, if I was bawling and all of that stuff. So that's where that was my manifestation of those insecurities. So work ethic, hustle culture, and all of that type of stuff. So when I graduated from high school, I didn't go, oh, I went to college and then I dropped out. Um,
Okay.
and I got into like business, I got into sales, I got into like marketing, any type of sales role that like exists, I think I've done.
Okay.
And like I loved it and I loved the challenge of it. And then from there, it just kind of evolved to really loving like business and that element and creating things. And I'd actually helped one of my best friends during kind of the COVID period to work in her hospitality businesses, and then actually we ended up building one of her other restaurants and like
Wow.
manage, and so I was from the ground up involved, yeah, and being able to help from that capacity, and I just loved it. I just loved being able to build things, see something that was nothing turn into something,
Yes.
and all of that. And so that's where like I guess all of that had really stemmed from. So that's like my background, and kind of what I was doing from a work-wise situation before starting at the
Okay, so
agency.
that makes sense. So you've had this entrepreneurial kind of business bug and you were just responding to, would you say, kind of like a climbing the ladder sort of professional situation? Like you just wanted to do whatever you needed to do to grow in your business? Not, I guess, I'm just trying to create like a before and after. Um, so
Yeah,
from
yeah.
like a before
So
standpoint, yeah, like you, what was driving you? Like you said, you were driven by this sort of like girl boss culture, would you say, or just, hustle culture? Like,
on a deeper level, if we really want to get into it, so I've always grown up, it's so interesting, I've always had this thing where I've always felt like I'm here and I want to be there,
mm,
and I'm never going to be there. And so for me, and now I understand what that is, it was actually the calling of God to say, hey, there's so much more in your life. I have a plan and a purpose for you. But I always had this perspective, no matter how hard my life got, that you have the capacity to design your life, that the structures that we have to work a 9 to 5 and to live this kind of superficial life that you just go from A to B. No, I always would even say, like, you are the master of your emotions. You are the master of how you can cultivate and curate a life. And I always say this, there's no rules. There's actually no rules to the way that your life should look and the way it should be designed. And so I've always had that intrinsically within me,
mm,
and always had this thing where I don't want to, like, one of my biggest fears, and still, to be honest, kind of is, and like, I mean this in no disrespect to anyone, this is just me and the way that I'm built. But I'm like, I don't want to be someone that just has a 9 to 5 and go buys a house out in the suburbs, and then that's just my
yes,
existence.
I can relate to
Like, and
that
then
100%.
yeah. And but I think we all have that dreamer within
Yes.
us, we all have the capacity to do that. We just don't know that we actually have that. And so that's always been my driving force. It's always been this thing where I'm like, I just want to design this life of my dreams. I don't know what it is, but I know that it's
Mm.
more than me just working some job and then that's it. And that's my life and that's my existence. There's more out there. So that's always been that driving force within
The
me, but it
spirit
was
the
always because I
spirit
felt like
behind
mm,
what you are pursuing.
yeah, yeah, and so I didn't have the language for that back
Yes.
then. I always just thought it was this, like, weird thing where I'm like, "I'm always here and I just need to get there, so therefore I have to do all these business things to get there." Now I understand what that is, but that's always been my driving force, yeah.
So, how did you, so if that was your driving force, when this opportunity once you're pivoting from marketing and you get approached or however you get into OnlyFans. For you, was that a like just another puzzle piece, like to move forward in your career?
So what had happened was I actually, when I was helping one of my best friends with her businesses, we were working crazy hours just so it all makes sense. We were doing like 100-hour work weeks for a couple of months. And it was full on like on your feet. And so I was just exhausted. So I went to Europe for a month. And when I was in Europe, I had another close personal friend of mine actually start up an OnlyFans
Okay.
agency. And so the reason why they had started up an agency is someone in their circle was already quite well known in OnlyFans and had a pretty big social media following as well. And they were complaining about their agency. So this close person that I knew was like, "Hey, why don't we start up our own?"
Mm.
So when I got back from Europe, they were like, "Hey, we've started up this agency. Obviously, you have a background in business and marketing and in startups. So would you want to help us build this?" And so again, there's that level of course, it's an adventure, like let's go for it. But then also on another level, OnlyFans has just kind of weirdly been like interjected into our culture and no
Yes,
one's really
totally.
like no, it's just popped up. And so no one really knows what it is, but everyone knows that it's there. And so I knew I've heard of OnlyFans. I didn't really know what it was.
Okay.
And I was like, I think you can sell your feet on there. Like, I don't really know. I know these people that came from quite poor backgrounds. Now they're rich. Superficially, they seem like they're happy. So, okay, therefore, this OnlyFans thing must be a positive, and we can supposedly make a lot of money doing it.
Okay.
Like, why not? Let's do this as the next adventure
So
type
for
of
you, it
thing.
was like very transactional. You didn't think about it too much in terms of the um like the actual mission of what it was. You're just like, okay, this from like a surface level, this looks like it could be helpful and we'll give it a shot.
Totally, absolutely, yeah.
So it from what it seems, you were only there for 5 weeks.
So what had happened was unofficially, in like a consultancy role, again, this was like a very close friend of
Yes.
mine. For about 6 months, I was involved in
Oh,
helping the
so the six
agency
month was
paid.
okay.
Yeah,
Got it. Got it. Got it. Sorry, I did not connect that.
yeah. No, you're so fine, but then paid, on the books, I lasted 5.5 weeks.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
before we get into the reasons for, the specific stories and things you would like to share, what is did you get exposed to the culture like because like you said, even myself, I'm familiar with it. I know enough. I honestly, I haven't done a ton of research in terms of just from a protection standpoint. I just don't really know. I don't know a ton of the inner
Yeah.
workings of it and how that whole thing, how it functions, etc. I know there's young girls on it. I know, high level sort of what it does. Were you obviously something led you to only staying there for real for 5 weeks. So can you kind of paint the picture of your experience there, what the culture is like, and yeah, what you're open to sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, for those months before it was like a paid on the books job, um, I didn't really see the back end of OnlyFans.
Okay.
So, the way that it works when you have an agency, there's actually specific programs that kind of plug into the back end so multiple people can access the OnlyFans account. Because technically, only one person is supposed to have access to the account, which is the girl that it's the account of. So I never really saw that end. In the beginning, again, because my kind of specialty that I was in social media, again, storytelling, marketing.
Yes.
It was okay, how do we market these girls online to be able to pull people in to go to their OnlyFans. So I was seeing all the social media elements of
Okay.
stuff. And so like the TikToks, the Instagrams, we were looking at Reddit, we were looking at Twitter, dating, any type of platform that you can think of online. There is probably girls being marketed for sexualized content.
Okay.
So that's what we were kind of building and learning, and there's so much that goes into it, like the sophisticatedness of, if you're promoting girls on Reddit, like you need different VPNs to be able to have these aged accounts, and like all this just wild stuff. Like we were talking to people in the Ukraine, we were talking to people in Germany, like this is a whole thing. It's like a global underground thing on how do you market and promote girls OnlyFans accounts, because you can't do it in an open way.
Right.
um,
That's the whole
and so
trickiness to it because
yeah,
it is pornography, but the
yes,
way
correct.
that it's being marketed, which was your kind of cap, right, is that it's
Yeah,
it's not as bad as it really is. That's how I feel like it's
yeah.
been kind of communicated to me, just as a random bystander.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so just for anyone listening that's like, "Oh, what do you mean OnlyFans isn't porn?" Well, actually, there was a 2024 study
Yes.
that came out that 98% of the content on OnlyFans, so 98% is porn. So if anyone's telling you that you can sign up to OnlyFans and you don't have to do porn, or there's people that are on there and they're not doing porn, that's 2% of people that are potentially not doing it. And it doesn't mean as well that it's just like, again, like cutesy photos or whatever. There's 2.1 million creators on
Wow.
OnlyFans, and only 300 of them make more than $1 million a year. So you can see that the caliber of what you're needing to do, because it is so competitive, is you need to be doing full on pornography to even stand a chance to make money in quotation marks. But only 300 people out of 2.1 million are making a lot of money. The average wage is actually $180. So I just want to like kind
Yes,
of put
so
that as
good.
like some
This
blanket
like this
statements
is
out
the
there.
reality.
So
Yes. So
yeah.
it's sort of this
Um
manufactured dream that's also
yeah.
deeply broken and um toxic. But just from like you said, I love that. From just a practical standpoint, if you think you're going to become a millionaire, the chances of that happening are very unlikely unless yeah, teeny teeny tiny. News flash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. Just so people can
Yes.
understand when I'm going through this, and talking about this. And so, yes, what you have to do is market girls in suggestive ways that's not full on. And so that's where we were looking at, we had actually hired someone who would study algorithms and would study what's trending at the moment. And so this person would send us every single day very specific curated
Mhm.
content. And so the girls would then have to do these videos and recreate these trending skits with trending sounds, with trending music. And what we would do to be able to pump this out is these girls would have to have at least 3 to 5 TikTok accounts. And on those TikTok accounts, they were having to post all of this curated original content. Now, people know that you can't upload the same video across different TikTok accounts, it gets flagged. So, this means that you're having to create unique videos across all these accounts. And we would ask these girls to create at least 5 unique videos per account. I know this is a lot, but basically,
And
what
did
I'm
that
trying to say is every
require
single
like
day.
some did you have a checklist type of things, things that needed to be included in this
Yeah.
video? And these videos, what were those things, nudity most of the time, like some form of nudity or no?
No, so it was more suggestive,
Suggestive.
provocative
Okay.
content. So, yeah, yeah, because, you can't post nudity on, like, Instagram and
Well, I
TikTok,
meant I don't
so
yeah,
how
I
can
don't
you get
I'm like
creative?
500. I don't mean like full on nude, but
Yeah,
suggestive, I guess is the right word. So you are showing a
yes,
lot of yourself.
yes, yes, correct. So, you like, we called Instagram content, so it's bikini and lingerie,
Right, okay,
basically.
fair. There we go. That's what I should have just said.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, That's a little bit of a clearer picture. So you would have so they'd have to do this
Yep.
process of
Mhm. Yep. So my role, as a part of, like, the marketing was to make sure that they were doing yeah, so sometimes the requirement was literally, like, 20 videos every single day across all your different TikTok
wow,
accounts. And again, this is stuff that is manipulated to go viral. It's manipulated to have the algorithm push it out. So we had one girl who was doing this, like, these techniques and these videos, and in 7 days from doing it, one of her videos got 2.2 million views on TikTok.
wow.
So the reason why I say that is just so people can understand how oversaturated social media is. If this is one agency in Australia and they're getting one girl to 2.2 million views on a very suggestive and provocative TikTok, imagine how many other agencies are out there, how many other girls are doing this. So, of course, social media is inundated and saturated with very sexualized
Oof,
content with the intent to make you want to watch porn. And for girls, what it does is it shows that this is what a rewarded woman in
yeah,
society is because of the likes, the comments, the view, like whatever. So then you inadvertently, you're being inundated with all of this. So you go, oh, to be liked and loved in this society, to be rewarded, I have to act like these girls because
that's
look at
right.
what's happening
Yep.
with them. So therefore, I need to go and do these things as well. And then that's what a man thinks a desirable woman is, because again, that's what's being rewarded, but it's all manipulated because we're understanding what's viral at the moment and what gets like pushed out. So you can see how it's creating such a false sense of reality and a false sense of, again, how a woman should be, how a man thinks that a woman should act, like all of this stuff, all with the intent to basically get you to OnlyFans to make money off you.
Right. Right. I mean, it's so hard to process, honestly. Like, we think we have an idea about social media and the positives and negatives that commonly are discussed, with friends but and why we'll get into you're so passionate about building a new culture on Instagram online because you know um the realities of the manipulation. You know the realities of the complete facade. And so you have the
Mm,
tools to encourage businesses to do a whole new, to write a new way. I mean, it's just so brilliant and incredible. What a calling, because, you know, and talk about God working all things together for the good, using your experience to then now
yeah.
contribute, because I always talk about the fact that social media is not all bad, right? I mean, I'm on it, and Waverly Girl is as wholesome as it gets, really. But I recognize um the ways in which it will help our business and grow our brand and our message. So there are wonderful things that I met you on there. I mean, there's wonderful ways to use it, but it's just so unfortunate that what I wanted to talk about too, I want to get into your faith and where that journey comes in, but the over sexualized culture, it's to me when I do my data for Waverly Girl and try and convince moms to recognize the significance of an alternative message and why girls need an alternative message, the thing that I keep coming back to is this over sexualized culture. What their beautiful little
Mm,
brains are exposed to far too young, and what that does to your heart, to your soul. It just has very destructive effects long term. And so, like you said,
yeah.
you're like, okay, so girls now think this is normal and boys now think this is normal. Aside from that, what would you say is the number one issue with this over sexualized culture? Or maybe not even number one, but
I think that okay. Oh, no.
oh,
We're gonna get
go
into
for
it.
it.
Okay. So something, and this is going to be a little bit
That's
heavy,
okay.
I
We're
guess,
girl,
to
we're here for it.
I will do my best. Okay. I've been learning a lot about covenant
Covenant.
theology. And I've been learning a lot about all the different covenants in the Old Testament, in the New
Mm,
Testament, and why marriage is such a significant covenant. And so, for people, what I think is happening is we are seeing the destruction of relationships. And so, when you actually paint the picture of this, and everyone believes to a capacity, even if someone's listening and they don't believe in God, you believe that there's a tension of good and evil in the world. You believe that there's a push pull of light and dark. So even with that lens on, I just want people to really think about what I'm about to say. So we see that one of the most precious things that we can have in this world is a marriage, and what comes from a marriage, children. And so the covenant of marriage, people are now just absolutely trashing that. They think that it's a contract. They think it's a piece of paper. You don't need to get married to be able to have kids or to have a partner and all of that, because now it's just null and there's no weightiness to what a marriage is. Well, that's because of the destruction of relationships through this hookup culture, through over sexualization, through this sexual liberation. But what does that do? It destabilizes society as a whole, because
agree.
now we're having children brought up in broken homes. But then also in this hookup culture, we're having a mass amount of children that are not even being born because people think that there's an alternative, that you can just terminate a
Amen.
life.
Preach.
So when we have a look like when we have a look at covenants, you can see that there is such a significance to every single covenant that has happened in the Bible, through the swapping of names, through the exchange of blood. And what happens when two become one in that sense? There is a swapping of names, there is an exchange of blood, because now two have become one in an inseparable way. And what comes from that is life, which is one of the most purest and precious in the first book of the
Yes.
Bible. The first thing that God says for Adam and Eve to do is be fruitful and multiply. He doesn't say go work, go hustle, go do this. That is the most important thing that we can do, is bring life into this world. And so on a very big grand scale here, the biggest problem with this over sexualized culture is it's destroying a nuclear family. It's destroying
Mhm.
the weightiness of a marriage, what that actually means, what a covenant family is, what a covenant relationship is. And then we're seeing how it's now destroying the next generation. And to think that like children aren't, important. You don't need to raise them in a family. They're these disposable things. And then even when you have children, there's no significance or weight to the privilege and the honor that it is. And so then you're creating generations of just brokenness. And so this is
Yes.
something that I've really come to realize, why there's such an attack on our sexuality, on this sexualized culture. Because if you can disintegrate a family and a family unity, then to be honest with you, that's where we can see this element of darkness really having a lot of success in our world. So that's the big picture.
That's so
Honestly,
well,
I really think as
I you just answered
yeah.
all of the rest of my questions. So we're done. No. I wanted
Bye.
bye. Okay, I wanted to that was so brilliant. I'm gonna look up the whole covenant um piece. I just love because that's been on my heart too. So thank you, Jesus, for that. Um, sex is sacred and it was designed by a God to be a reflection of his nature and um we have completely distorted and stomped on and destroyed um what is to be a very precious and once in a lifetime gift and it breaks my heart and hearing it coming from your perspective. I wanted to ask your opinion on sex in general, and you just answered it for me. I think if the problem with over sexualized culture is it makes sex, from my opinion, my opinion, is casual, and the
Mm,
casualness of sex leads to, like you said, thinking, okay, if I get pregnant, it's fine because there's things I can do to eliminate the situation, and so in my opinion, we need to stop having premarital sex because that will solve a lot of problems and question marks that people, don't know how to deal with. It's like, okay, maybe we just start by abstaining from sex and honoring the covenant that God created. And there won't be as many of these question marks for young women.
I think as well, just to even simplify it a little bit more, and like to add on to what you're saying, because I agree 1,000%. Even coming into faith, oh my gosh, I remember I sat there with my pastor and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, so Christians don't live like with their partners before they get married. I'm like, how are you going to know who they are? Like, you have to live with someone to know. Like, I was so perplexed by this. So it's not like I've had this thought my
Well,
whole
and
life,
same
like,
because
guys,
I
no,
also didn't
like
honor
in
all of it.
that
So that's for another story. But
way.
yes,
Yeah, and so I just wanna be able to, so people don't think that I'm coming on. I've lived both lives, and I
yes,
understand the difference and
of
why we
course.
live this life, and so even just to, um if people are like, "Oh, but that sounds so weird. How are you gonna get to know someone? How are you gonna get close to someone, like, if you don't sleep with them?" Like, all of this. This is what we have to understand, and I think it's really important, is that sex or any type of, uh, physical intimacy in that capacity, it creates a false sense of intimacy. So you might be sleeping with a guy and you think that you know him so well and you guys are so close, but zoom out, take sex off the table. If you have to sit there and actually have a conversation with him with no physical intimacy in any type of capacity and just communicate with him, how are you going to go with that? Like, really, how are you going to go with that? And
Yeah.
that's how you get to
Where's
know
the
someone,
character?
because
Do
when
you have
you
any
take
idea
any
about the character? Yeah.
yeah. When you take all physical intimacy off the table and you say this is a hard barrier, you have to go, oh my gosh, I have to ask really intentional questions. When it comes to conflict resolution, I can't just use but I can't use my sexuality. I can't any of these things. I have to really get to know someone. So then when it gets to that point of marriage, you actually do really know someone on such a deep and intrinsic way, because you have to communicate with them. You can't default to using your body to be able to create this sense of intimacy. And that's what we do when we have
Yes.
sex. And so then I'm like, that should be maybe like even just a perspective switch for people is, hey, because we hear it all the time, even in secular world. Yeah, I really like him, so I want to wait to be able to have sex with him to get to know him, then I will. And it's like, so we know this on a deep
Mhm.
level.
Yes.
So why don't we just implement that long term, and you'll see the benefits of really getting to know your partner, feeling safe with them. And again, how do you communicate with them? And then that can come into it at the right time. But I think people think that like sex is the only part of a relationship that matters. And you see it in secular relationships when that is the only foundation. Then they get married, then they have kids, and they have no foundation. And then there's problems.
That's right. But
So
that's
I
what our
think that
culture
that's
has
just something.
created. Our culture has created a structure in which the sex is the most, it's the number one sort of, I guess, focal point,
Like
foundation,
foundation.
which sounds
Yeah,
so
yeah.
crazy when you think about it from a biblical perspective. But I love you saying like zoom out and think about it just from a very logical perspective. And how is this going to function? How are you going to grow? How are you going to live your life with this person on like a fundamental level? That takes a totally different set of eyes, and so being
Yeah.
being aware of that as a young girl, I think a lot of it, Victoria, is like, I think of myself, I wasn't aware of these things. I wasn't being told these things.
Mm,
I
same. Yeah,
wasn't it
totally. Yeah.
wasn't in my conversation. I mean, my parents tried, but I was so busy listening to a million other voices, which is why conversations like this are so important, because girls need to hear a different perspective, right? And and
Yeah.
we are both coming from being on the other side of this, right? By the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, we now have a fresh set of eyes on this
Mm,
sacredness that is life, that is finding a partner, that is getting married, that is having children. It is a gift and it is a blessing. And there is a design on purpose, right? It's not to
Mm,
keep us like all in this weird like loserville like mentality. It's for our best. So where did you come
yeah.
how did you come to this conclusion? Because you were saying you're on the other side now. So what walk me through the Lord intervening.
Yeah, totally. So, what had happened was I'm working at the OnlyFans agency, and, when I started to actually see all of the porn, so when I started to actually go on the back end of, the OnlyFans platform, as we know, so for about 6-ish months, I'm there, I'm affiliated with the agency, I start working there, so of course I built relationships with these girls. You know, we're having parties, we're going to dinners, we're doing all these things, and so when I started to actually see, um, their porn, and just to, like, to preface this as well for some people, what happens when you start working, well, when you, get to a certain point in your OnlyFans account, what will happen is you can't facilitate, because the biggest allure of OnlyFans compared to traditional, like Pornhub or whatever, is the fact that people think that you're actually talking to the girl. And so what happens is, just say if you have 5,000 subscribers on your OnlyFans account, you can't sit there and facilitate conversations with people 24/7, 7 days a week across all these different time zones or whatever. So you have to offset that. That's why an agency exists. So an agency actually is pretending to be the girl, and it's a sales job. So the girl will come to the agency, you onboard them, you learn everything you can about them, you create this thing called a brief. And then that brief will get sent to people called chatters. Now, chatters are traditionally people from third world countries that you pay a very small wage, and they impersonate being the girl, and it's a sales job for them. So ours were actually from the Philippines. And so we would have people from the Philippines that are pretending to be these girls while we manage the accounts, do all the social media, and et cetera, et
So they
cetera.
don't even really run their
Um,
social they don't really run the accounts.
no.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so the reason I want to emphasize that as well is I was in a podcast the other day, and this guy goes, "Oh, like, but a lot of men know this, but they still don't care." And it's like, I think that they have this thought in the back of their mind that, nah, it's not that girl. She's probably, I am talking to her. And the reason why I want to emphasize it is no. The realisticness of it is you are talking to someone in a third world country that is not the girl, that is pretending to be the girl. It's a sales job, and they're literally manipulating you as much as they can to get as much money off you as possible. And you think that you're talking to some girl having this intimate relationship with her. You're not. Like, that's
Yeah.
just like the matter of a
Yeah.
fact. um yeah. And so just a little bit harsh. I'm so sorry, but like I hope people hear my heart in that, but it's just the truth.
Yeah. No,
And I
I
just
mean,
hope that that shatters the illusion.
the reality is though, these things are they're built on fantasy, and
Yeah.
we need to cut through the bullshit and just speak the truth of what's really going on, and how hopefully that will have some bit of impact. Um because it's
Mm.
just the whole thing is a sham. It's a sham.
Yeah, and for any girl that's listening, like I have a friend in the States that she has really, really started a solid business in actually talking about, so her boyfriend was speaking to OnlyFans girls, doing all this stuff, and she found out about it. And he literally could not understand what the problem was. He did not see it. And so she's actually started to create an entire business supporting girls that are going through this specific problem of, my boyfriend's watching porn, my boyfriend with OnlyFans and stuff. And so that's why for any girl that's listening, this is wrong, this is a problem, and I want you to be able to potentially take that to your partner and be able to educate them as well. Because I'm seeing, like, this girl is like super TikTok famous because of all these poor girls that are coming to her,
Wow.
and they're saying this is happening with my boyfriend. So that's why as well I just want to highlight that,
Yes. We should
for
link her.
girls
We'll
as
link her to
well,
this
and also,
episode too, just as a
yeah,
resource. Yeah.
yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why I just think it's important, as well, to be able to just talk about these, just to be able
Yeah.
to equip girls, and also just to be able to help if there is a girl out there that's like, oh my gosh, my boyfriend is doing that. It's making me feel horrible. just remember he's so targeted
Mhm.
by an
Yes.
agency, he's so targeted by a culture, he's also targeted by people that are trained in this thing called the girlfriend experience, to pull in guys. So I don't want girls to like take that burden
Yes.
on of, well, maybe I do have to sexually perform for him, maybe I do have to look that, like, no, 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 no. There is literally an entire culture that is manipulated to try and pull men in, and it's not by your
Right.
fault, you
And
know.
another reason
Yeah.
why, we need God, right? And, um, I think, hold on, I'm just plugging in. Of course, my computer charger is not plugged in. Oh my gosh, you've gotta be kidding me. Let's see, how are we on? Okay, we have, like, we're good. Hopefully
Okay.
this will get us through. Oh my gosh, I'm just like, why did I not plug my computer in? This is insane. Of course, so, but, like, back to the whole piece of God being the restorer of everything, and,
Mm,
at the end of the day, we want all of these wonderful resources, which are so helpful, but the number one resource is Christ, right? That can
yep, absolutely.
transform and reveal and speak through and speak to all of this confusion and upside down morality that is just part of our culture now. And we're worlds apart, Victoria, but we're dealing with the same issues, right? um so now, how do you, I know that you're deeply passionate about taking what you've learned, taking what you know, and using it to rebuild, because you love to build in a different way. So, tell me about that, and like how you are planning to do that via Instagram, etc. Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm so sorry, I felt like I totally tangented, but just, like, to update, so basically a very weird series of events is what led
Okay,
me back to
yes.
church. Um, yeah, and, so, like, we can
No,
go
let's
into it
go.
if you
Yeah,
want,
yeah.
but basically to really okay, so what had happened was, yeah, as I said, I'm seeing porn for the first time, all of this type of stuff just to, make it all make sense. And I'm feeling, and I've never seen porn, I've never been exposed to it. And so this is the first time I'm actually seeing it. And it's people that I know. So it's really messing with me because I'm like, we commodify these women because we're using them, we're selling them, we're basically digital pimps. But then at the same time, I know these people and I've never seen porn. This is really weird. Like, and I'm just really struggling. So what had happened was is I started looking for answers. And
Mm.
so I started asking people at the agency, like, how do you feel about what we're doing? Like, do you struggle like with it, all this type of stuff? And do you think it's wrong? And people were like, it's like a safe injecting heroin room. People need a safe place to do drugs. We give people a safe place to do porn. And I was just not feeling satisfied with the answers I was getting from the people in my world. But again, everyone's telling me this is okay, but I feel like it's not. So I just don't know how to feel. I don't know how to process this. So what had ended up happening is I like had this genius idea. I was like, okay, I'm not feeling good in myself. I'm like, I'll go offset all the bad that I'm doing and I'll go do something good. And then that will mean that. And so actually, no, I was like, I'll offset all the bad that I'm doing and I'll do something good. And we were building a medicinal cannabis company at the time as well. And so that medicinal cannabis company was like my baby.
Mhm.
So I was like, cool, I'm going to go volunteer. I'm going to go help a bunch of refugees. It's going to make me feel better. I'll offset all the bad that I'm doing. By the time I come back, the cannabis company will be up and running and I don't have to work at the OnlyFans agency anymore. So that was my genius idea to like make myself feel better. And so what I did is I had this really random thought that this church that I had gone to as a kid had like a refugee program. And I was like, oh, sick. I'll go sign up for the refugee program at that church that I went to as a kid. And so this is where like it gets really cool. So as people know, it's not like one email goes to one place and then it gets distributed in a big church. You have different departments, all the emails go to like the different people that are in charge of those departments. So I had signed up to help refugees. But that email, that application never went to that department. Instead, I found out months later that the young adults pastor got an
Oh,
email,
wow.
and that email had, yeah, Victoria wants to reach out to the church. Here's her number, call her. And so I got this call one day from this random girl, and I kind of alluded to what was going on, but she basically had like invited me down to church on a Thursday to talk with her. So I rock up to church on a Thursday, and I remember I'm sitting in the car park at the front of this church, and I just kept getting this overwhelming voice being like, don't go in there. You're such a bad person. You'll burst into flames. Like, don't go in there. And I was just like wrestling with myself, but like I eventually went in and just word vomited to this girl everything. And she basically said, I really think you should come to church this weekend. I think you'll really resonate with the speaker. So Sunday comes around and I end up going to church, and this lady in church is speaking about this over sexualized culture, and she's speaking about the dangers of it, and she's speaking about things like Snapchat and OnlyFans and that how it's destroying the next generation. And like I'm sitting there and I'm getting wrecked because I'm like, I literally work for an OnlyFans agency. And I remember she said this thing and I didn't even understand it, but it's what stuck with me the most is she goes, Christians are supposed to be the salt and the light of this earth, but they have failed. And
Wow.
it just wrecked me. And so, yeah, after she finished speaking, I literally ran up to her and I just was like, hi. I was like, my name's Victoria. I work for an OnlyFans agency and I hate myself.
Ugh,
And
wow.
she was, yeah. And she was just amazing. She didn't do this Christian thing where she's like, you need to repent, like you're going to go to, like,
Right.
no. She literally just goes, let's have lunch.
Oh,
And this woman had lunch with me and she answered all my questions. I said, isn't it like a safe injecting heroin room? Isn't this a positive? Isn't this liberating? Like all of this stuff. And just from answering my questions, I had someone ask me, like, did they lay hands on you? Did they give you the gospel? No, none of it. They literally just answered my questions and treated me like a human, not like this little pet project that how can we salvation
right.
her? Just like,
Exactly what you
and
needed to
literally,
hear, like, exactly how you needed to be received and
yeah,
embraced. Mm.
exactly. And so we could get into why I'm so passionate about that. But
Well, we'll have
and
to do a
so, but
part
anyways,
2.
that was on a Sunday.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
hoping, by the way, I was hoping the
Yeah.
social media piece was gonna transition into your faith piece, but I was gonna bring it up. So, this is just, like, incredible. I mean, it's incredible, and I know this about you, but this was only, like, a year ago, right? This
Year and a half
transformation was
ago.
a year and a half?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you went to lunch with her,
Yeah.
and then was it? Because I always use the quick thing, like, I went back to church and my life changed. But obviously a series of things
Yeah.
happened. So was yours pretty instantaneous, or like was it this relationship with this woman?
No, it was instantaneous. So that was on a Sunday. By the Friday, I quit the OnlyFans agency. So 5 days later, I walked away from everything. 6 weeks later, I was sober. I was baptized. And then 6 months later, I was in America and I was on a speaking tour talking about all of this.
Wow. Unbelievable. It's so awesome. You know, there's so many things I
Yeah,
wanna talk to you. I think we need to do a part 2 and do a whole conversation around being a
absolutely.
bridge builder, because there is this very interesting, I don't wanna make this about me because this is not why we're here. But there is a there's a way to get to non-believers that is, I think the church has done, in general, I think the church has not done a great job at evangelizing to people in a real and an authentic way. Like, this woman was perfect.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to hand you a Bible and sit you down and point to where, your salvation comes from. She just wanted to be your friend and lead you
Mm.
to your best friend, which would be Jesus, right? And that is, to me,
Yeah.
is like so powerful and very much, I think, needed in this season, because people are hungry. People are. desperate for something. I always use the term when I liken it to myself is that like my air supply was cut off. Like I couldn't figure out why I was so anxious and so unhappy. And it was because like my air supply was cut off. I
Mm,
was not connected to my source that is there to give me life and fulfill my dreams and my calling. And um, so I just think that that is beautiful that this woman was there to embrace you in the way that you needed to be embraced. And may, you know, if anything, I pray for people listening that if they're not a believer, that, you know, you and me, two people right here who will gladly embrace you and gladly talk to you and be your friend because that's where it starts. Be you know, it's just
yeah,
amazing. And we're all listen, every single person that comes into this earth ends up needing to have a conversation with Jesus. So we're all on the
yeah.
same playing field. Um, so you quit your job, you go back to church, reconcile with Christ, and now, you know, what we can hear your passion in your voice. You're incredible. I can't wait to see what the Lord does with your life and your platforms and your building businesses because I think this is just the beginning for you. But what is like tell me what Victoria's like next year looks like. What are you excited what makes you the most excited about your future and how God has transformed it. You know, what's next?
I love that. That's a great question. I'm honestly so excited for yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it next time, but yeah, just the evolution of this business that I really felt like the Lord downloaded into me. And for me, in Australia specifically, we don't have a culture of faith in any capacity. Like in America, you guys actually have a fundamental baseline of faith, and it's actually quite normal in the culture in the states, and it's just integrated way more. We don't have that, and we don't even have faith based influences. We have
Wow.
nothing over here, and I just am so excited, and like it's just mocked. Like there's anyways, it's a whole thing in itself, but Australian culture is very, very different. And so I just cannot wait to see. Yeah, as I've been along this journey, meeting incredible people like you as well, who like, I just have this hunger and this burn to see a change. But we know that social media is such a critical element of this. But social media can be this beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I think that, it's time for a lot of us to step up and come to the plate. And why is it that the dark forces in this world can come and they can make all this money on social media? They can corrupt people's minds and they can do all of this. But us as people of the light, we can't step onto that platform and have that same influence, that same capacity, and those same resources. And so
Mm.
I'm really excited to see within the next year what does happen with creating gems. I really am praying that we're able to build a new culture here in Australia of faith based influences, of bringing faith into mainstream conversations and showing people through social media that this isn't weird and this is a great life. And to be able to help equip, other people who, yeah, have these crazy stories, have these beautiful hearts, and they just don't know where to begin
Mm.
um, on
So
social media, how to show up and all of that. So I'm really excited for that and to see what adventures come from that. I'm excited to continue. I love this is my favorite thing to talk about. I feel so blessed that I get to talk about this and how Jesus just radically changed my life.
mm.
And I pray that I continue to have opportunities to be able to speak this story and share it. And yeah, I go into schools with another non for profit, and they actually, through biblical sex ed, see salvations of teenagers. And so
Wow.
imagine you're hearing about sex ed, and at the end of it, you find Jesus. And so I'm just so excited to see where this next year takes me, working with that non for profit and yeah, all of this stuff on social media and to really see what the Lord creates through all of this. So that's what I'm excited for.
I love it's so inspiring because, you know, I just think that the whole cycle of this conversation starting off with, you know, a problem and you are in a lot of ways in my mind a solution because of what you have seen and what you will create. And it's hopeful. Like one thing that I'm just really trying to provide on this New Girl Culture podcast is I want to present the truth. I want to provide
Mm.
the truth, but I also want to do it with the coding of God's love and allow girls and young women and women to understand that God loves us. He deeply loves us, and he
Come on.
allows women, in conversation and friendships, and experiences in our lives to show us his love, of course. And I want this to be a place where girls really feel God's love. Thank you for your patience. So, as I was just saying, um, you know, I want this to be a place for God's love to shine through these conversations in a way that hits girls' hearts differently. Um, and your voice certainly speaks to that. So, thank you for being here. It's such an honor to hear your story. And like I said, I can't wait to see what the Lord does with everything you're going to put your hands to. Um, we are so grateful that Victoria came on to share her incredible story. I hope that it opened your eyes to the realities of what we're dealing with and left you feeling encouraged about leaders that God is building up to shift and change the next generation. I really feel that there will be a new culture, and it's because of women like Victoria, um, that we have hope to see a new girl culture, a new internet culture, all of it. It's very exciting, and I hope this inspires girls everywhere.